Hello everyone, and welcome to a video on the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel. I'm Spencer, the host of Constructive Criticism, and we are back for another Quest for 10 video. Hashtag Quest for 10 is my goal to get better at Magic the Gathering 2019, where I get 10 wins with every major deck starting with Standard. Hopefully we'll jump into other formats as I complete all the Standard decks throughout the year, But this week we're going to talk about Jeskai Control. Jeskai Control is the premier control deck of Standard right now, before the next set comes out, and it's also one of my favorite decks in Standard. So it was pretty easy for me to pick up. I already had all the cards that I could need for any of the builds that I would want to play on MTG Arena, and so we dived right in, getting a 5-1 to start with, and then a 3-2 with a friends list, and then a couple of wins in match play on Arena. So let's talk about the list that I ended up with. So after these 10 wins, after I think I went 10-3 or 10-4. I did not do as good as a job tracking this one. I've already started to track better on my next Quest for 10 with blue-red drakes, but on this one I was too lazy, and it wasn't as good. But I did do some streaming of it, so if you want to check that out, the VOD might still be up on Twitch. But with that being said, here is the list that I ended up with. So, I would play 2 Syncopate, 2 Essence Scatter, 1 Justice Strike, 1 Negate, 2 Seal Away, 1 Search for Azcanta, 3 Deafening Clarion, 3 Ionize, 4 Chemister's Insight, 3 Crackling Drake, 1 Ixalan's Binding, 1 Settle the Wreckage, 2 Cleansing Nova, 3 Teferi, 1 Niv-Mizzet, 2 Expansion Explosion, and then I would play 26 lands in the form of 4 Clifftop Retreat, 4 Glacial Fortress, 3 Island, 2 Mountain, 1 Plains, 4 Sacred Foundry, 4 Steam Vents, and 4 Sulfur Falls. That's the main deck. The sideboard we have is 3 Disdainful Stroke, 2 Lava Coil, 2 Negate, 1 Treasure Map, 1 Invoke the Divine, 1 Ixalan's Binding, 1 Settle the Wreckage, 2 Lyra, 1 Ral, and 1 Niv. So this is the list that I ultimately ended up on. I tried 2 different lists. One was really similar to this. I think the only difference is I cut a Lyra for a Treasure Map in my last couple of matches. And the other list that I tried was one of my patrons. It was a Star of Extinction Nexus of Fate version of the deck that really relied heavily on Search for Azcanta. Both lists were fun. Casting Star of Extinction one was really fun. But ultimately, one of the things that I wanted to do is really mirror what's close to doing well in this challenge. So while the other deck was fun, the list that I'm ending up with is the list that's kind of closer to what people are doing on Magic Online and in Grand Prix and things like that. So this deck makes up about 11% of the Magic the Gathering Online winners meta that is posted to MTG Goldfish. And the deck is pretty good. Obviously, it's one of my favorite decks. The ability of Chemister's Insight to dig you deeper through your deck, to look through for your answers, the ability to play lots of different types of answers in Jeskai rather than something like Blue White or Grixis. I mean, Justice Strike, Lava Coil, Seal Away, Ixalan's Binding. Then you have Wrath effects in the form of Deafening Clarion and Settle the Wreckage and Cleansing Nova. And I think that I knew a lot about this deck going in. But one of the things that I've been trying to learn with this deck specifically is how to play against Blue-Red. Blue-Red is one of the most difficult matchups for me to gauge in this deck, and one of the things that I learned in playing is how good Spell Pierce is right now. Because regardless of anything that you're doing against that deck, Spell Pierce is really good against Ixalan's Binding. Spell Pierce is really good against Teferi. Spell Pierce is really good against Expansion Explosion. Spell Pierce is really good to hold up against a Search for Azcanta. Spell Pierce was definitely something to worry about, and so your matchup versus the Dragons deck, instead of the Drake deck, is actually just a little bit worse. You're pretty good against the Phoenix deck, like a lot better. When they're trying to attack you with Phoenixes, rather than just stick one of their dragons and drakes and protect it, you're much better against that game plan. Being able to Lava Coil their thing that sticks, and then less likely to have a dive down or Spell Pierce is pretty good for you, which just wasn't the case against the Dragons deck, which is why I lost to, I think, all 3 of my losses were against the Dragons deck. That's specifically the dive down Niv-Mizzet version that doesn't play Phoenix. And You know, I don't know if that's something you need to fix. Obviously, it's one of the top decks on MTGO. Obviously, it's doing well at Grand Prix and things like that. But this deck was so good against the green decks. Being able to have Cleansing Nova, have Ixalan's Binding, have Settle the Wreckage, you can go up and down on your number of sweepers. Lava Coil, Justice Strike, like, you line up really well as a Teferi deck against green decks. And then you also really line up really well against aggro decks. Tokens is something, that's a green deck that you line up really well against. They have a really hard time with Crackling Drake plus Deafening Clarion. And while every deck's gonna have its weakness, I was pretty okay with ending this and saying, I'm really good against Drakes or Phoenix. I'm not as good against Drake/Dragons, but I think the deck is still fine overall. One of the things that I learned playing my Patron's deck is he was playing less than 26 lanes. He was playing 25. And one of the things that we talked about in the losses, all the losses with his deck came from not having lands in play in a timely fashion. And I really think that it's important to have that happen for you. When you look at this deck, the way that you're going to lose is by missing land drops. So you can't afford to play less lands and not always get to 4 and 5. Because once you get to 4 and 5, you get to dig through your deck, and eventually you just start drawing whatever you need. But it's important that you do get to that part in the game. So, with that being said, let's just kind of talk about some of the key cards. Expansion Explosion is really interesting. It's a card that acts as a counter spell in a counter war. It's a card that acts as a draw spell, a kill spell. I killed creatures with it. I killed planeswalkers with it. I killed my opponents with it. There was one game on stream where I killed my opponent by making them deck themselves. It's certainly worth the inclusion in the deck. And part of the reason why this version and these versions are so much more popular than there's the straight blue-white decks other than just the mana. The mana's honestly pretty good in these decks. You have to play a lot of lands, right? You're playing that 26, 27 land range, but you're pretty happy to do so. Because access lands get discarded by Chemister's Insider. They just make your explosions bigger. So I think that overall, this list is interesting. This list is good. Syncopate is a card that one of the lists that I was playing had 3 of them. I wanted to cut down on some of that. I think that Essence Scatter and one Negate in the main is really valuable, things like that. And the counter suite, you'll notice, I have hard counters, right? You have a Negate, you have 2 Essence Scatter, but you'll notice there's only 3 Ionize. And that's for mana-based considerations. I know that people really, really like, Sinister Sabotage, but I just haven't found it to be necessary. I've played it in this deck. I've played it in blue-white. It's definitely a powerful counterspell. It's just not a must-have in this deck. And honestly, the fact that you can leave up Ionize and Essence Scatter together and Syncopate together a lot more easily because it's less restrictive on your blue mana lets you play that extra planes even, which is really good. Like, the fact that I can play at planes and not be worried about my turn 3 counterspell being completely destroyed by it is really valuable because, as we see here, we have those 2 Cleansing Novas in that single Settle the Wreckage, and that's big game and something that I really appreciated. So, outside of that, I think that people have been saying that you're crazy for playing less than 4 Teferi. I didn't even notice. I honestly, between Expulsion, Niv-Mizzet, drawing cards off Crackling Drake, Chemister's Insight, I always saw my Teferi. It wasn't something I needed to worry about. Teferi, while the best Planeswalker in Standard, is certainly not as good as it was last year. It's still good, but people have gotten better against playing against it. Sealaways was an interesting card. It's really good to have against all the Azcanta Vanguards that might see play, whether it's from the mono-white decks, whether it's from the tokens deck. Azcanta Vanguard can be a real problem for this deck, and Sealaway kind of helps you with that. So, outside of that, I think that, aggro matchups were really good. I didn't really have any, obviously I only lost to one deck, but I played a lot of this deck, so, aggro matchups felt good. I think that what can happen, though, is mono blue can be bad for you. I luckily didn't run into mono blue in this run, but I've played against that deck a lot. That's kind of the aggro deck that you're like, man, I really don't want to play against this. And once again, that's partly because of Spell Pierce. If they're playing main deck Spell Pierce or things like that, or they're playing Spell Pierce and they're 75, it can really hurt you. They're definitely playing Dive Down. So if they get a counter your Steal Away for 1 mana, you can be in trouble. And all of your removal spells cost more than 1 in this deck specifically. So they're getting a mana advantage on you there. So I think the mid-range decks are all green-based for the most part. Grixis being the only one that's not. I think you're pretty favored against all the mid-range decks. I think that you go bigger than them. I think that Grixis is kind of a little bit too clunky to really take advantage of things, and I think you're a pretty good spot there. In the control mirror, it kind of depends. If they're going straight blue-black, you can be in trouble. But I think that this list specifically, having main deck Niv-Mizzet, having access to another Niv-Mizzet, plus a route, plus more negates, and the treasure map post board is really powerful. Having treasure map in the board lets you go up on your low cost good cards, right? So I have now Search for Azcanta and treasure map that I can fight over and things like that, rather than having to fight over something like a Teferi. And that's a pretty big game. I also really like that the Ixalan's Binding is in this list in the 75 as a 2 of. It's been good against mid-range, it's been good against control, it's been good against aggro. Like, the card has just been great. Highly recommended if you're playing a control deck, things like that. And then I would categorize the Izzet decks as the other decks in the format that aren't those mid-range aggro and control decks. And like I said, I think that you're good against the Phoenix versions. I think that the other versions can be pretty hard for you. When they protect their Niv, you're just never going to win the game. One of the things is, though, that Ixalan's Binding can really help with that. If you can fight over the right things and get that thing binding, those are the games that you win, and those are all the games that I won with this list. So, yeah, I think that about covers that. I think that we covered, the blue-red matchups. I think that we covered the green decks. I think we covered the mana. The other thing I would say is I did like Starve Extinction when I was trying the other list. So if you wanted something else in the 75 that was a little bit different, that really helped you in it, kind of lots of different matchups. It does kill Niv plus Planeswalkers. There was a time where I definitely where they tapped out for a Niv with a Ral in play, and had I had Starve Extinction in my hand, it would have been really valuable and really powerful. So that's it for this week on Quest for 10. Don't forget that you can join hashtag Quest for 10 too. Let me know what you guys are playing, what's going on, what you're playing against, what you're learning. This was my first foray into it. We're going to be doing Blue-Red Dragon Drakes, the deck that I talked about a little bit next. I've already started posting Google Docs for me playing the decks. I did a 5-0, had a 3-0 on stream. That video is here on the YouTube channel for my start for Quest for 10. And that's going to be an interesting one to talk about, as I'm learning a lot. It's not exactly in my normal playstyle, but that's kind of the goal of this Quest for 10, is for me to play more decks, different decks, and learn a little bit about Magic. So thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to patreon.com/ccmtg and patreon.com/thetrophymages to support this content. I really appreciate all of you. Leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this list, what you're playing in Jeskai, and we'll see you all next week or next time with another Quest for 10 video.